In this unit, we are going to be looking at percents. Percents represent parts out of 100 parts. For example, if I write 40%, percent is represented by this symbol here, what I mean is I am referring to 40 parts out of a total of 100 parts. To illustrate 40%, I can draw a 10 by 10 table. And in that 10 by 10 table, I would want to shade in 40 out of the 100 squares, so that when I say 40%, I'm referring to the 40 shaded in squares that are 40 squares out of a total possible 100. Let's look at another example. Let's try to represent 12% using the same 10 by 10 grid. To represent 12%, let's get creative here, I'm going to have to fill in 12 of the 100 boxes. 10 across the top and 2 more out of a total possible 100. This would represent 12% of the overall number of boxes filled in with happy faces. I'm going to do one more and give you a chance to try to come up with what percentage we're representing. I have filled in a certain number of the boxes with some stars. Take a minute and decide what percentage this illustration would represent. If you count the stars, you'll see I've got groups of 6. I've got 3 groups of 6 for a total of 18 stars. So this would represent 18%. Let's get rid of those. And one last example. What if we go back and we'll use the easy fill here, and I'm going to fill in every one of my boxes with that purple color. And because I've got 100 boxes and all of them are filled in, that would be 100%. 100% represents one whole. The whole thing is filled in for 100%. Fractions are something you should be very familiar with after doing the first few units in the Pre-ACE math. So we're going to look at changing percents into fractions. For example, if I write 6%, we've just learned that 6% means 6 parts out of 100 parts. And if you look at that statement, you can see that that's basically telling us what the fraction is right there. It's 6 parts out of 100 parts, or 6 100ths. Now you may have noticed that the fraction we created can be reduced down to lower terms. And again, you've learned how to do that in previous lessons. I see that 6 is an even number, 100 is an even number, so they should both be divisible by 2. Remember that you can reduce a fraction as long as you can find a number, a single number that divides into both the numerator and the denominator, and in this case, 2 will work. So I'm going to take 6 divided by 2 to get 3, 100 divided by 2 to get 50, and so converting 6% into a fraction expressed in its lowest terms would be 3 over 50. Let's try one more. We'll do 75%. By definition, 75% means 75 parts out of 100 parts. And although 75 over 100 is a fraction that represents 75%, it's always best to reduce down to lowest terms. 75 and 100 are both divisible by 25. And so we can reduce down 75 100ths into 3 over 4. 75% expressed as a fraction in its lowest terms is 3/4. Okay, now that you know how to change percents into fractions, let's get rid of this. And the next thing we're going to look at is changing percents into decimals. So we'll just change this one word, and we'll change that into, lost my O there, decimals. Let's start with the example 7%. Remember that percent means parts out of 100. And so if we want to go from percentage into decimals, whether you write this step down or not, you can say 7 parts out of 100, which really is 7 divided by 100. And using our shortcut method, if the decimal's here on the whole number, we'd move it over 1, 2 spots, and we would end up with decimal 0.7. So 7% can be represented as decimal 0.7. Doing another one, 24%. Again, if you want to skip this and know that you just need to take the 24 and divide by 100, because remember that would be 24 over 100. I know I said I would skip it, but I'm going to put it there for those that like it in there. I have to move my decimal over 2 spots, 1, 2, and so I would end up with decimal 2.4 as the decimal equivalent of 24%. The last thing we're going to look at is changing fractions into percents. So changing fractions into percents. We looked at changing percents into fractions, so now we're going backwards. Let's try to change 4/5 into a percentage. Well, the first thing we'll need to do is change our fraction into a decimal. So you might want to remind yourself here that we need to go to a decimal first, and then we'll go to a percent after that. So although ultimately we want to get from a fraction to a percent, we'll go fraction to decimal to percent. Remember that fractions are just divisions, so this really is 4 divided by 5. 4 over 5 is the same as 4 divided by 5. Using long division, which we've learned into one of the previous units, we will divide the 5 into the 4. 5's not going to go into 4, so I have to set up a decimal and add a 0. Move my decimal up here. 5 does go into 40 8 times. 8 times 5 is 40, so I have no remainder. So my answer is decimal 8. Now, take a minute and look at what we did up above here. We'll look at our last example. When we wanted to convert from a percentage to a decimal, we divided by 100. So to go in the reverse direction, instead of this way, we want to go this way. It makes sense that we're going to have to multiply by 100. So we'll take our 0.8, which is now in decimal form, and multiply by 100%. Again, this is a shortcut multiplication, just like it was a shortcut division. So we'll need to move this over 2 spots, and we would end up with the answer 80%. So to summarize, changing fractions into percents, we'll take our fraction, we'll change it to a decimal, and then we'll change it to a percent. To go from fraction to decimal, we use our division, and to go to decimal, from decimal to percentage, we will multiply by 100%. I think we should do one more example. I'm going to clear the page here. Let's look at changing, how about 9/11 to a percent. Well, we said that the first thing we needed to do was think of 9/11 as being 9 divided by 11. So to set that up, 9 divided by 11 will look like this. 11 will not divide into the 9, so I'm going to have to put a decimal, which will make me put a decimal here, and add a 0. I might end up adding a few more zeros, but for now, 1 is enough. 11 into 90. Well, I know that 8 times 11 is 88, so that's a good start. 8 times 11 is 88. Do my subtraction, and I end up with a 2. Let's keep going for a little bit. I'll add another 0, bring it down. I now have 20. 11 will go into 20 only one time. 1 times 11 is 11, and I'll subtract, and I get a 9. One more time, add a 0, bring it down, and we've got that 90 again, which I know 11 will go in 8 times, and 8 times 11 is 88. Remainder 2. You can see that this is going to go on and on. It'll end up with another 1, and then an 8, and then a 1, and then an 8. So I'm going to stop right here. I'm going to say that 9/11 is decimal 818. That gets me from a fraction into a decimal. And I'm going to take my decimal 818, multiply it by 100%. With those 2 zeros, that'll move my decimal over 2 spots. And so 81.8% would be my final answer.